for control, and they call it being proactive. But in trading, acting too soon is the same as aiming at shadows. It burns capital, drains confidence, and reinforces the very impatience you're trying to escape. The real reason waiting feels so unbearable is because it challenges your sense of safety. We live in a world that rewards activity. We're told to work harder, move faster, stay productive. In trading, that belief turns toxic because the market doesn't reward movement, it rewards precision. It rewards alignment. The trader who acts less often but at the right time makes infinitely more progress than the one who's always doing something. Yet when you sit in front of your screen, your mind tells you that doing nothing means falling behind. It can't comprehend that in this game, inaction can be the most powerful action of all. I used to sit at my desk, staring at flashing candles, watching my setup almost form. My fingers would tighten on the mouse. My mind would race ahead, whispering, "It's close enough. Take it now." That single moment, that microsecond of internal pressure is where most traders lose the game. Because once you give in to that urge, you reinforce the habit of impatience. You teach your brain that relief comes from action, not from control. And the next time, the urge arrives faster. It's like scratching an itch. It feels good for a second, but it only makes the irritation worse. What's fascinating is that your impatience isn't random, it's learned. Your mind has been conditioned through every environment you've lived in to believe that waiting equals failure. In school, waiting meant you were behind. In work, waiting meant you weren't productive. In relationships, waiting often meant rejection or loss. So of course, when you sit in the market and wait, your subconscious interprets that stillness as threat. It pushes you to act, to do something, to regain a false sense of control. But in trading, control doesn't come from acting, it comes from aligning. It comes from learning to sit with uncertainty long enough for the market to reveal real information. Think about it like this. The market is an ocean. Some days it's calm, some days it's violent, but it's always moving. You can't command the tide, you can only learn to read it. The impatient trader tries to surf every ripple, believing that activity equals opportunity. But the professional waits. He studies the rhythm, the energy, the timing of the waves. He knows that if he waits for the right moment, the ocean will give him all the momentum he needs. He doesn't fight for opportunity, he lets it come to him. And that's what patience really is. It's not the absence of action, it's the mastery of timing. Here's the truth you must accept before anything else can change. Your impatience isn't a flaw in your character. It's a signal from your subconscious that says, I don't feel safe when I'm not in control. The solution isn't to force yourself to wait longer. The solution is to redefine what safety means. Safety doesn't come from controlling the market, it comes from controlling your response to it. Once you make that shift, waiting no longer feels like a void you have to survive. It becomes a state of readiness. You start to see that nothing needs to happen right now. The market will still be there tomorrow, next week, next month. Opportunity never disappears, it just rotates through time. Once you understand that impatience isn't a lack of discipline but a misunderstanding of safety, the next step is to retrain your mind. You have to teach yourself that stillness doesn't mean danger and silence doesn't mean absence. The quiet moments between setups aren't the space where nothing happens, they're the moments where consistency is built. Because how you handle those gaps determines everything that follows. In those spaces, you either train your mind to wait for probability or to chase emotion. And that's where true trading confidence begins. What I'm about to share might feel uncomfortable at first because it challenges everything you've been taught about progress. In most areas of life, progress means movement, output, measurable change. But in trading, real progress often happens in the quiet spaces, those long, still moments when nothing seems to be happening, and you're sitting there waiting for the market to align with your plan. It's during those moments that your psychology is tested most deeply because every part of you wants to escape the silence. The market slows down, volatility drops, setups take their time to form, and your mind starts searching for something to do, some reason to act, because stillness feels like stagnation. But here's the paradox. The trader who learns to sit through that silence without needing to fill it is the one who gains the most control. Patience doesn't mean doing nothing, it means staying completely present without forcing the next move. The consistent trader treats waiting as part of execution, not as a pause from it. They understand that the waiting phase isn't separate from the trade, it is the trade. Every moment you wait for your setup, you're proving that your belief in your process is stronger than your emotional urge to act. Most traders fail not because they misread the market, but because they interpret waiting as wasted time. They think patience is passive. But patience is active awareness. It's an ongoing dialogue between you and uncertainty. It's your mind observing, adjusting, staying neutral, staying ready. You're not waiting for the market to move, you're waiting for alignment between the market and your criteria. And that's an entirely different state of mind. Think of the best surfers in the world. They spend hours floating on the water, eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for a single perfect wave. They don't paddle for every ripple that rolls by. They don't rush into the water chasing movement. They watch, they listen, they feel the rhythm of the ocean until they sense that precise moment when everything aligns. Then and only then do they act. Their success doesn't come from constant movement. It comes from stillness, from the discipline to wait until the wave presents itself. That's what mastery looks like, not in the number of waves they ride, but in their ability to resist every temptation to move before the time is right. Now, let's bring that back to trading. Every candle on your screen is just another ripple. The market is constantly giving you motion, but very rarely is that motion meaningful. The professional trader doesn't chase every flicker of price. They wait for structure, confirmation, clarity. They treat stillness not as boredom, but as information. A quiet market isn't empty, it's communicating. It's telling you that now is not the time. And that message is just as valuable as any breakout signal or indicator. When you start to see stillness as data, your entire relationship with time changes. You stop feeling the need to make something happen and start allowing the market to tell you when something is happening. In my early years, I used to fill those quiet moments with noise. I'd add indicators, switch time frames, open more charts, anything to feel busy. The silence made me uneasy. I thought if I wasn't analyzing, I was falling behind. But every time I forced activity into a quiet market, I lost money. And it wasn't because the trades were bad, it was because they were unnecessary. I hadn't learned how to sit still. I hadn't learned how to let the silence work for me. One day, after another string of losses from trades that didn't even meet my criteria, I finally sat back and asked myself, why do I feel like I have to do something all the time? That question changed everything. Because the answer wasn't about strategy, it was about fear. I was afraid that if I didn't act, I'd miss out. I was afraid that if I waited, the market would move without me, and I'd be left behind. What I didn't realize was that this fear was creating the very losses I was trying to avoid. When you learn to sit through the silence, you begin to experience something subtle but powerful, mental space. That's the zone where observation becomes clarity. When you're no longer emotionally rushing to act, your perception sharpens. You start noticing the small things you used to miss, the rhythm of price movement, the transitions between expansion and contraction, the emotional tone of the market itself. You become aware of context, not just movement. You start seeing the difference between a wave forming and a wave fizzling out. That awareness is what creates confidence. Not because you can predict the next move, but because you know you'll recognize it when it's time. Patience isn't about sitting on your hands. It's about training your attention. It's learning to redirect your mental energy from reaction to observation. You don't stop thinking, you start thinking differently. Instead of asking, what can I do right now? You ask, what is the market telling me right now? That one shift turns impatience into composure. Because when you're truly listening, the need to speak, or in trading terms, the need to act, fades away. You begin to realize that the silence between setups is not the enemy. It's the environment where discipline grows roots. It's where emotional impulses lose their power, because you've replaced restlessness with awareness. The next time you find yourself staring at the screen, tempted to trade something that looks right but doesn't meet your rules, I want you to pause and remember this. Waiting is execution. Every second you choose not to act outside your plan, you're executing the highest form of discipline. You're proving to yourself that control doesn't mean doing, it means choosing. You're shifting from the need to manage outcomes to the ability to manage yourself. And that's what separates a consistent trader from a compulsive one. But let's be clear, learning to sit through the silence doesn't happen overnight. It's a process of rewiring your relationship with stillness. You have to practice it deliberately the same way you practice setups. Every time you sit and watch the market without reacting, you're strengthening a new association in your brain. Silence equals safety. Waiting equals control. Doing nothing equals confidence. That's how you slowly dissolve the old pattern that says you need movement to feel secure. So, as you begin to integrate this into your own trading, treat every moment of quiet as a training ground. Don't fight it, observe it, learn from it. Because the more comfortable you become in stillness, the more powerful your actions become when the time is right. You'll discover that when patience stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like awareness, you've crossed a threshold. You're no longer chasing opportunity, you're aligned with it. And that alignment is what builds consistency over time. But waiting isn't just about awareness, it's about trust. You can only stay patient when you truly believe that your setup will appear again. Without that belief, stillness will always feel like loss. And that's what we'll explore next, how trust transforms patience from a conscious effort into an effortless state of mind. The deeper you go into this journey of mastering patience, the clearer it becomes that awareness alone isn't enough. You can sit still, you can observe the market, you can remind yourself to wait, but if deep down you don't truly believe that your edge will appear again, patience will always feel forced. You'll always feel like you're missing something. The moment you stop believing in your edge, stillness turns into fear. Every second you're not in a trade feels like risk, and that emotional pressure pushes you to act before the market gives you permission. So the real foundation of patience isn't discipline, it's trust. Trust in your process, trust in probability, and most importantly, trust in yourself to execute when it matters. Every trader who struggles with patience is really struggling with trust. They might say, I have a good system, I just need to follow it. But what they don't realize is that the system itself doesn't create confidence, the belief in the system does. And belief doesn't come from logic, it comes from experience. That's why you can understand your strategy intellectually, but still feel restless emotionally. You might know that your edge has a statistical advantage, but unless that belief is emotionally integrated, your subconscious will always override your logic in moments of uncertainty. The instant you feel doubt, fear steps in and whispers, what if this time is different? What if the setup never comes? What if the market takes off without you? And the moment you start listening to that voice, you stop waiting for your edge. You start chasing the illusion of opportunity. The truth is, the belief that you're missing out is rooted in scarcity, not in reality. The market is infinite. Opportunities never end. They just move through time. The same patterns, the same structures, the same probabilities appear again and again, like waves returning to the shore. But most traders operate as if every moment is their last chance. They treat the market like a closing door, and that sense of urgency distorts their perception. When you believe opportunity is scarce, you create emotional pressure to capture it now. But when you believe opportunity is abundant, you're free to wait. You stop chasing the next trade because you know there will always be another one, and that belief changes everything. It's the difference between anxiety and confidence, between reacting and responding, between trading from fear and trading from clarity. Let's go back to one of the most powerful analogies I've ever used, the casino. The house doesn't care what happens on any individual hand of blackjack. It doesn't care if a few players win big in one night. The casino knows its edge. It knows that over hundreds of hands, thousands of spins, millions of rolls, probability will bring the money back. That knowledge creates absolute calm. The house doesn't rush the game. It doesn't panic when it loses. It doesn't change its rules mid-play. It doesn't widen the bet limits to recover a drawdown. It just keeps executing its edge, hand after hand, spin after spin. That's why the casino always wins over time. It doesn't rely on emotion. It relies on math, process, and patience. You need to approach trading the same way. Your edge, whatever it is, represents your probability advantage. It's not a guarantee. It's not meant to tell you what will happen next. It's meant to guide your behavior across a series of trades. When you internalize that, something shifts. You stop needing to know what the next outcome will be because you trust what the next 100 outcomes will look like collectively. And that's when patience stops being effort and becomes instinct. You're no longer sitting there counting candles, trying to force yourself to wait. You're simply calm because you understand that each moment is just one data point in a much larger distribution. You're thinking like a professional, not a participant. But this kind of trust doesn't come from wishful thinking, it comes from evidence. You have to give your brain proof that your edge works. You can't just tell yourself to trust your system. You have to show yourself why. That's why journaling, backtesting, and reviewing trades are so critical. They give your subconscious data it can believe in. Every time you see your setup produce results over time, you're teaching your brain that waiting isn't dangerous, it's intelligent. And slowly, that evidence begins to rewire your emotional responses. The silence between setups stops feeling like loss because you've experienced enough proof to know that the next setup is inevitable. When you reach that point, trust becomes emotional certainty. You no longer doubt whether your setup will appear, you just don't know when. And that difference changes everything. When you stop demanding certainty from the market, you start giving certainty to yourself. You no longer need to predict, you just need to prepare. You no longer need to be right, you just need to act correctly when the signal arrives. That's the mental posture of a professional trader. Calm readiness without expectation. You're not waiting for the market to reward you, you're waiting for it to align with your process. Let me give you a real example from my seminars. I once worked with a trader who had a solid system with a clear edge. He knew his probabilities, he knew his setups, but he kept taking trades that didn't fit his plan, convinced that he was reading momentum. Every time the market looked like it might move, he jumped in early. He told me, "I can't stand the idea of missing it." After reviewing his journal, we discovered that the trades he skipped were irrelevant because every time he waited, a cleaner setup appeared later. His problem wasn't analysis, it was belief. He didn't believe his edge would come back. When he finally learned to trust that it would, his entire behavior changed. He traded less, but made more. He felt calmer, slept better, and for the first time described trading as peaceful. That's the power of trust. It's not just mental, it's emotional freedom. When trust replaces fear, patience stops being something you force. It becomes the natural state of a mind that feels safe in uncertainty. You stop needing to know what's next because you already know who you are in relation to it. You know what you'll do when your signal comes, and you know what you won't do when. It's not there. That's what consistency really means. It's not the outcome of following rules, it's the reflection of inner trust. So the next time you find yourself feeling restless, tempted to chase the market because it's been quiet too long, remind yourself of this truth. The market isn't withholding opportunity from you, it's preparing it. The silence isn't punishment, it's positioning. Every minute you wait for your setup is a minute you're aligning yourself with probability, not emotion.